The auditorium fell into silence as Elijah Carter made his way across the stage, his white cane tapping rhythmically against the polished wood floor. 800 students packed into Riverside High School's auditorium, and not one of them believed what they were about to witness. Most were there to laugh. Some were there to mock. A few were there out of morbid curiosity. But what happened in the next 8 minutes would silence every single person in that room and change the course of dozens of lives forever. Elijah was 14 years old, blind since birth, and had never performed in front of anyone except his mother. He couldn't see the sneers on their faces. He couldn't see Brett Williams and his crew in the front row, phones out and ready to capture what they thought would be the most embarrassing moment of the year. He couldn't see the principal nervously shifting in her seat, already regretting allowing this performance to happen. But Elijah could feel it all. The hostility hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. His fingers trembled as they found the edge of the grand piano. He carefully positioned himself on the bench, his hands hovering over the keys. The whispers started immediately. Giggles rippled through the crowd. Someone in the back shouted, "This is gonna be good," followed by cruel laughter. Brett leaned over to his friend and whispered loud enough for others to hear, "I can't believe he actually showed up. This is better than I thought." But then something extraordinary happened. Something that nobody in that auditorium could have possibly predicted. And to understand just how remarkable this moment was, we need to go back. Back to where this all started. Back to a boy who lived in darkness, but would bring light to everyone around him. Elijah Carter had never seen a sunrise. He had never watched his mother's smile spread across her face. He had never looked at his own reflection in a mirror. Born completely blind due to a rare genetic condition, Elijah experienced the world through sound touch and an extraordinary gift that he didn't even know he possessed yet. His father, Jonathan Carter, had been a jazz pianist before Elijah was born. Not famous, but talented enough to play in clubs around Chicago, making enough to support his young family while pursuing his passion. Jonathan had dreams of teaching his son to play one day, of passing down the gift of music from father to son. But life had other plans. When Elijah was only 2 years old, Jonathan was killed in a car accident on his way home from a late-night gig. He left behind a grieving wife, a blind toddler, and an old upright piano that sat silent in their small apartment for years. Elijah's mother, Grace Carter, worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. She was a nurse during the day and cleaned offices at night. Money was always tight, but Grace never let Elijah feel like he was missing anything. She read to him for hours every evening, her voice painting pictures that his eyes never could. She described everything in vivid detail, the way rain looked sliding down windows, the colors of autumn leaves, the expression on a dog's face when it wagged its tail. At school, things were different. Riverside High School was not equipped for a blind student, not really. Sure, they had the legally required accommodations textbooks in Braille, a teacher's aide to help with navigation, accessible technology in the computer lab, but they couldn't mandate kindness. They couldn't force the other students to see Elijah as anything other than different, other than less. By the time Elijah reached 8th grade, he had perfected the art of invisibility. He kept his head down, spoke only when spoken to, and ate lunch alone at a corner table in the cafeteria every single day. He knew the route from each classroom to the next with perfect precision. 14 steps from English to the stairwell, 22 steps up the stairs, turn right 9 steps to math. His world was measured in steps and sounds, and the feeling of walls against his fingertips. But at home, in their cramped apartment on the third floor of a building that had seen better days, Elijah had something else. He had his father's piano. It started when Elijah was 7 years old. Grace had kept the piano covered with a sheet since Jonathan's death, unable to bear the sight of it, unable to hear its voice, without breaking down. But one evening, Elijah had been exploring the apartment, his hands trailing along furniture and walls as he built his mental map of their home. When his fingers brushed against the sheet-covered piano, he stopped. Underneath the fabric, he could feel the shape of something large, something wooden, something that hummed with potential energy even in its silence. "Mom, what's this?" he had asked. Grace had paused in the doorway, dish towel still in her hands, her heart constricting. That was your father's piano, sweetheart. Can I touch it?" She should have said no. She should have kept it covered, kept that door to the past firmly closed. But something in his voice, something in the way he stood there with his small hand pressed against the sheet, made her walk over and pull the covering away. Dust motes danced in the evening light as the old upright was revealed, its dark wood surface marred with scratches and water stains, its ivory keys yellowed with age. Elijah's hands explored the instrument with the careful reverence of an archaeologist discovering ancient treasure. He traced the shape of it, the smooth keys, the rough texture of the wood. And then, almost accidentally, he pressed down on middle C. The note rang out clear and pure, filling their small apartment with sound. Elijah gasped. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. From that day forward, the piano became Elijah's obsession. With no money for lessons and no teacher to guide him, he taught himself. He started by just listening to the sounds each key made, building a mental map of the keyboard. High notes on the right, low notes on the left, the black keys raised slightly above the white. He would spend hours just pressing keys randomly, listening to how notes sounded together, discovering which combinations felt right and which felt wrong. Grace found old tutorial videos on YouTube and played them for him, describing what she saw on the screen. Elijah would listen intently, then try to recreate what he heard. His progress was slow at first, frustrating. His fingers wouldn't do what his mind wanted them to do. But Elijah had something that couldn't be taught, an innate understanding of music, a gift inherited from a father he barely remembered. By the time he was 10, Elijah could play simple melodies. By 11, he was working through basic classical pieces, learning them entirely by ear. By 12, he was composing his own music, pouring all the loneliness and isolation of his daily life into the keys. The piano became his voice, his way of expressing everything he couldn't say out loud. When he played, he wasn't the blind kid who got bullied at school. He wasn't the poor kid whose mom worked all the time. He was just Elijah, and his music was beautiful. Grace would sometimes stand outside his door at night, listening to him play, tears streaming down her face. She heard Jonathan in those notes. She heard her son finding himself. And she wondered what Jonathan would think if he could hear his boy now playing the instrument he had loved so much, creating something transcendent from tragedy. But Elijah never played for anyone except his mother. The piano was his private world, his sanctuary. The thought of performing in front of others terrified him. At school, nobody even knew he played. It was his secret, his escape, his own small piece of light in a world of darkness. Riverside High School was not a bad school, exactly. It was large, overcrowded, underfunded like most public schools in the area. 1,500 students spread across 4 grades, a maze of hallways and stairwells and lockers that slammed shut like thunder 100 times a day. For a blind kid, It was a nightmare of navigation and noise. The annual talent show was one of Riverside's biggest events. Every March, students would compete for prizes and glory, performing everything from magic tricks to dance routines to stand-up comedy. The winners got their names announced at graduation, a trophy in the display case, and bragging rights for the rest of the year. More importantly, for many students, it was a chance to shine, to be seen, to prove they were more than just another face in the crowd. Elijah had never even considered participating. The thought of standing on that stage in front of the entire school made his stomach turn. He had seen how cruel his classmates could be when they thought nobody was watching. He couldn't imagine what they would do if given a captive audience and a target. His typical day at Riverside was a carefully choreographed routine of avoidance and survival. He arrived early before the hallways got too crowded. He knew exactly where to stand to be out of the main flow of traffic. He had memorized the locations of every bathroom, every exit, every quiet corner where he could disappear between classes. His teacher's aide, Mrs. Patterson, was kind, but ineffectual. She made sure he got from place to place safely, but she couldn't protect him from the casual cruelty of teenagers who saw him as an easy target. The cafeteria was the worst. The roar of conversation, the clatter of trays, the scraping of chairs, all of it combined into a wall of sound that disoriented him every time. Elijah had his spot, a small table in the far corner, away from the popular kids' tables, away from everyone, really. He would sit alone, eating the lunch his mother had packed, listening to the sounds of friendship and laughter happening all around him, but never including him. He knew what they called him. He'd heard the whispers, the slurs, the jokes made at his expense. The blind kid. That weird guy with the stick. Tapper. That last one had started in 6th grade when someone noticed the rhythmic sound of his cane and decided it was hilarious. The nickname stuck. Even some of the teachers used it, though never to his face. But Elijah endured. He had learned early that reacting only made things worse. So he kept his head down, did his work, and counted the hours until he could go home where his piano waited, where he could be himself, where the darkness didn't matter because music doesn't need light. What Elijah didn't know was that his carefully constructed routine of invisibility was about to be shattered. Because someone had noticed him. Someone who saw in Elijah's vulnerability not a person deserving of compassion, but an opportunity for entertainment. Brett Williams was everything Elijah was not. Tall, athletic, handsome, in the way that teenage boys sometimes are, all sharp jawlines and confident smirks. He was the starting quarterback for Riverside's football team, which in a school like Riverside made him royalty. Brett had the kind of popularity that came effortlessly. People laughed at his jokes, whether they were funny or not. Teachers overlooked his mediocre grades because of his performance on the field. Girls competed for his attention. Boys competed to be his friend. But underneath the golden boy exterior, Brett had a cruel streak. It wasn't obvious to everyone. He knew how to hide it, how to be charming when adults were watching. But when he was with his crew, when he thought nobody important was paying attention, Brett revealed who he really was, a bully who got his entertainment from making others feel small. His primary targets were the kids who couldn't fight back. The awkward ones, the poor ones, the different ones. And Elijah, with his white cane and his careful steps, and his obvious vulnerability, had been on Brett's radar since freshman year. It had started small, accidental bumps in the hallway that sent Elijah stumbling, books knocked off his desk. Once Brett had moved Elijah's cane while he was in the bathroom, leaving him searching blindly for 10 minutes before a teacher found it and returned it. Brett never got caught. He was too smart for that. He knew exactly how far he could push without crossing the line into something that would get him benched from the team. And honestly, most of the teachers at Riverside were too overworked and overwhelmed to notice or care about subtle bullying. As long as nobody got physically hurt, as long as parents weren't calling and complaining, they turned a blind eye to the social hierarchies and casual cruelties of high school life. Brett's crew consisted of 3 other guys from the football team, Tyler, Marcus, and Jake. They weren't leaders like Brett. They were followers, the kind of boys who laughed too loud at Brett's jokes and went along with whatever he suggested because being in his orbit was better than being outside of it. None of them would have targeted Elijah on their own, but together with Brett egging them on, they became something worse than the sum of their parts. In early March, as posters for the upcoming talent show started appearing on walls around Riverside, Brett was walking through the cafeteria with his friends when he spotted Elijah at his corner table, eating alone as always. An idea began to form in Brett's mind. An idea that he thought was absolutely hilarious. An idea that would, he believed, cement his status as the most entertaining guy in school. "You know what would be funny?" Brett said to his crew, nodding toward Elijah. "What if we got Tapper to perform in the talent show?" Tyler laughed. "Dude, what would he even do? I don't know, man." "Doesn't matter. Can you imagine him up on that stage in front of everyone? It would be comedy gold." Marcus looked uncertain. "That's kind of messed up, isn't it?" Brett turned to him with a look that made Marcus immediately regret speaking up. "It's just a joke, man. Relax. Besides, if he's too scared to do it, he'll just say no, right? No harm done." But Brett had no intention of taking no for an answer. And what started as a cruel joke was about to become something that would change multiple lives in ways that Brett couldn't possibly have imagined. Over the next 2 weeks, Brett's campaign against Elijah intensified. It was as if deciding on the talent show plan had given Brett permission to be even crueler than before. He wanted to make sure that when the moment came, when Elijah finally humiliated himself on stage, it would be the culmination of weeks of build up a punchline to a joke that everyone at Riverside was in on. It started on a Monday morning. Elijah was walking to his first period English class, his cane sweeping side to side in the familiar rhythm he had perfected over years. He didn't hear Brett coming up behind him because the hallway was too loud, too chaotic with the sounds of lockers slamming and students shouting to each other. The first thing he knew was a sudden impact as Brett's foot connected with the back of his leg, sending Elijah stumbling forward. His cane clattered to the floor, spinning away from him. Elijah fell to his knees, his hands instinctively reaching out to break his fall. Pain shot through his palms as they hit the hard floor. Around him, he could hear laughter, could feel the presence of students stopping to watch but not to help. "Oh man, I'm so sorry." Brett's voice was loud, theatrical, dripping with false concern. "I didn't see you there. You okay, buddy?" Elijah's face burned with humiliation as he felt around for his cane. His fingers finally closed around it, and he pulled himself up, his knees aching, his dignity shattered. "Maybe you should be more careful." Brett continued, his voice still friendly, but with an edge that Elijah recognized. "Wouldn't want you to get hurt." The laughter followed Elijah down the hallway. He was late to class. Mrs. Patterson hadn't been there to intervene. And when he finally slid into his seat, trying to calm his racing heart, he heard whispers around him. Heard his name. Heard the word freak. 2 days later in the cafeteria, Brett took things further. Elijah was carrying his lunch tray, navigating the maze of tables with practiced precision. He knew the layout by heart, 17 steps from the lunch line to his table in the corner. 14 more if he had to detour around the trash cans. But on this day, as Elijah was halfway to his destination, Brett casually stuck his foot out into the aisle. Elijah never saw it coming. His shin connected with Brett's ankle, and suddenly he was falling, his tray flying forward, his lunch scattering across the floor. The crash of the tray hitting the ground was followed by a moment of silence, and then the cafeteria erupted in laughter. Elijah lay there on the floor, feeling the wet stickiness of spilled juice soaking into his clothes, hearing the cruel amusement of 300 students who saw him as nothing more than entertainment. "Dude, you really need to watch where you're going," Brett said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "Oh wait, I guess you can't, huh?" The laughter got louder. Someone started a slow clap. Elijah wanted to disappear, wanted to sink through the floor and never come back. But he had learned over the years that the only thing worse than being humiliated was showing how much it hurt. So he carefully picked himself up, located his cane, and walked out of the cafeteria without eating his clothes, stained, his stomach empty, his spirit crushed. Mrs. Patterson found him in the bathroom 20 minutes later, trying to clean himself up. She asked what happened, concern in her voice, but Elijah just shook his head. What was the point of telling what would change? Brett would deny it. His friends would back him up. And Elijah would just be labeled a snitch on top of everything else. The incidents continued. Brett would imitate the tapping sound of Elijah's cane as he walked down the hallway, his friends joining in, creating a rhythm of mockery that followed Elijah everywhere. In gym class, which Elijah normally sat out, Brett started making comments about how sad it was that some people couldn't participate in sports, couldn't contribute to the team, couldn't be useful. The gym teacher, Coach Morrison, told Brett to knock it off, but his heart wasn't in it, and Brett knew he could push the boundaries. One afternoon, Brett and his crew cornered Elijah near the bathrooms during lunch. Nobody else was around. Brett stood close enough that Elijah could smell his cologne, could feel his presence like a wall blocking his path. "Hey, Tapper," Brett said, his voice low and menacing. "You know what I think? I think you're just taking up space here. Nobody wants you around. You're like dead weight, a burden. Your mom probably wishes you had never been born." Elijah's hands tightened around his cane, his knuckles turning white. He wanted to respond, wanted to tell Brett that he was wrong, that he had value, that his mother loved him more than Brett could possibly understand. But the words stuck in his throat, and all he could do was stand there silent and shaking as Brett's laughter echoed off the tile walls. Tyler, who had been watching with increasing discomfort, finally spoke up. "Dude, that's too far." Brett rounded on him. "What did you say?" "Nothing." "Never mind." And Tyler learned, as Marcus had before him, that questioning Brett was not worth the social cost. But Brett wasn't done. Not even close. Because he had a plan, and all of this, the tripping, the mocking, the verbal abuse, it was all just set up for the main event. The talent show was only a week away, and Brett was ready to execute the most elaborate joke of his high school career. He was going to convince Elijah Carter to perform in front of the entire school. And it was going to be, Brett thought, absolutely hilarious. The talent show sign-ups were posted outside the main office. Students had until Friday to add their names to the list. Brett had been monitoring it all week, watching as various acts registered: a girl from the drama club doing a monologue, a band from the music program, a group of dancers from the cheerleading squad. All predictable, all boring. Brett needed something better. He needed Elijah. On Wednesday afternoon, Brett gathered his crew in the parking lot after school. They sat on the hood of Brett's truck, the spring sun warm on their faces, planning their strategy. "Here's how it's gonna work," Brett explained. "We go to him all nice, right? We tell him we've heard he has talent, that he should share it with the school. We build him up, make him think we're actually being cool for once. What if he says no?" Jake asked. "He won't. Trust me, this kid is desperate for acceptance, desperate to be seen as normal. We offer him that, and he'll take it." "But what's he gonna do?" Marcus pressed. "He can't sing or dance or anything." Brett grinned. "Doesn't matter. That's the beautiful part. Whatever he does, it's going to be a disaster. And we'll be there in the front row recording the whole thing. It'll go viral. We'll be legends." Tyler shifted uncomfortably. What if he's actually good at something? The other three looked at him like he'd suggested the earth might be flat. Brett laughed, shaking his head. "Bro, it's Tapper. He can barely walk down the hallway without falling over. There's no way he's good at anything." It was decided. The next day, Brett would approach Elijah and plant the seed. He would be charming, persuasive, friendly. He would make Elijah believe that this was his chance, his moment to prove himself. And Elijah, desperate and lonely and so tired of being invisible, would say yes. Thursday afternoon, Elijah was at his locker, organizing his books for the evening's homework. He had developed a system over the years, textbooks arranged by size notebooks, labeled in Braille, everything in its proper place, so he could find what he needed without sight. He was so focused on his task that he didn't hear Brett approach. "Hey, Elijah." The voice made Elijah freeze. Brett Williams never talked to him, never used his actual name. The fact that Brett was standing there apparently alone based on what Elijah could hear speaking in a friendly tone set off alarm bells in Elijah's mind. "Hi, Elijah," responded carefully, his hand tightening around the textbook he was holding. "Listen, man. I know we haven't really talked much before, but I wanted to say something to you." Elijah waited tense, expecting a punchline, a cruel joke, something that would make sense in the context of their relationship up to this point. But Brett's next words caught him completely off guard. "I think you should perform in the talent show." Silence. Elijah's brain struggled to process what he had just heard. Was this a joke? It had to be a joke. Brett Williams, who had made his life miserable for years, was suggesting he perform in the talent show. What Elijah managed to say. "The talent show." Brett repeated, his voice warm and encouraging. "Look, I know you probably think I'm messing with you, but I'm serious. I was talking to some people and we all agree that it would be really cool to have more diverse acts in the show. And I heard that you're actually really talented at something. Music, right?" Elijah's heart was pounding now. How did Brett know about the music he had never told anyone at school, never given any indication that he played piano? His mind raced through possibilities. Had his mother mentioned it to someone? Had a neighbor overheard him practicing? "I don't know what you're talking about," Elijah said, his voice barely above a whisper. Brett pressed on. "Come on, man. Don't be modest. Everyone has something they're good at, right? And I think it would be really powerful if you got up there and showed everyone that you're not just, not just defined by your disability. You're more than that. We all know you're more than that." It was masterfully done. Brett had found exactly the right words, had tapped into exactly the right insecurities. Elijah desperately wanted to be seen as more than his blindness. He wanted people to know that he had value, that he had talent, that he was a whole person with dreams and abilities. And here was Brett Williams, the most popular guy in school, offering him that opportunity. But still, Elijah hesitated. Something didn't feel right. Brett had never been kind to him before. Why would he start now? "I know you're probably thinking I'm pranking you," Brett continued, as if reading Elijah's mind. "And honestly, I get why you'd think that. I haven't always been the nicest to you, and I want to apologize for that. I've been immature and I'm trying to be better. So this is me trying to make things right, giving you a chance to shine." The apology was what did it. Elijah wanted so badly to believe that people could change, that high school didn't have to be 4 years of misery, that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. And Brett sounded so sincere. "I play piano," Elijah heard himself saying, "but I've never performed for anyone except my mom. I don't know if I'm good enough. I'm sure you're great, Brett said enthusiastically. And even if you're not perfect, who cares? It's about having the courage to get up there and try right. That's what the talent show is all about. Come on, what do you say? Will you do it? Elijah's mind was screaming at him that this was a mistake, that he was walking into a trap, that Brett Williams had never done anything out of kindness and wasn't going to start now. But another part of him, the part that was so tired of being invisible, the part that poured his heart into music every night and wondered if anyone would ever hear it, that part wanted this, wanted the chance to show everyone who he really was. Okay, Elijah said quietly. I'll do it. Brett's hand clapped down on Elijah's shoulder, making him flinch. That's awesome, man. Seriously, you're gonna be great. I'll make sure your name gets on the list. This is going to be amazing. As Brett walked away, already pulling out his phone to text his crew about his success, Elijah stood at his locker, his heart pounding, wondering if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He had. That evening when Elijah got home, he told his mother what had happened. Grace was in the kitchen, still in her scrubs from her nursing shift, preparing dinner when Elijah walked in. She could tell immediately that something was different. Her son had a look on his face that she hadn't seen in years, nervous excitement mixed with fear. Mom, I need to tell you something, Elijah said, setting his backpack down by the door. Grace turned from the stove, giving him her full attention. What is it, sweetheart? I signed up for the talent show at school. I'm going to play piano, in front of everyone. For a moment, Grace couldn't speak. Her son, who had never performed for anyone who spent his entire life trying to be invisible, was going to get on stage in front of the whole school. Her first instinct was to protect him, to tell him no, to save him from the potential humiliation. But then she saw the expression on his face, saw the hope there, and she couldn't bring herself to crush it. That's wonderful, Elijah, she said, walking over and pulling him into a hug. I'm so proud of you. What made you decide to do this? Elijah explained about Brett's invitation, about the apology, about feeling like maybe things were changing. Grace listened with growing concern. She had heard stories about Brett Williams. She knew the kind of boy he was. But she also knew that her son needed to learn to navigate the world himself, needed to take chances, needed to believe that people could surprise him. So she swallowed her worries and offered her support. When is the show? She asked. Next Friday. 7 days. Then we have a week to get you ready. What are you going to play? Elijah had already thought about this. There was only one piece he wanted to perform. Dad's composition, the one he never finished. I completed it last year. I want to play that. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Jonathan had been working on an original composition when he died, a beautiful jazz piece that he had played sections of for Grace late at night. After his death, she had found the sheet music incomplete in his things. She had no idea that Elijah had somehow gotten his hands on it, had learned it by ear from the recordings she sometimes played when she thought he wasn't listening, had finished what his father started. Your father would be so honored, she whispered. He would be so proud of you, Elijah. So incredibly proud. For the next week, Elijah practiced like never before. He would come home from school and go straight to the piano, playing for hours, until his fingers ached and his back hurt from sitting. Grace would listen from her bedroom, marveling at her son's talent, praying that the school would see what she saw, a remarkable young man with an extraordinary gift. The piece Elijah was preparing was complex, a fusion of jazz and classical that required not just technical skill, but emotional depth. It started softly, almost hesitantly, like someone afraid to speak. Then it built, gradually gaining confidence, becoming more complex, more layered. There were moments of darkness, minor key passages that spoke of pain and loneliness. But then it would shift, transform, finding light and hope in unexpected places. The final section was triumphant, powerful, a declaration of strength and resilience. It was in every way the story of Elijah's life translated into music. As the days passed, Elijah noticed something strange at school. People were talking about him. Not in the cruel way they usually did, but with curiosity, anticipation. Brett had spread the word that something special was going to happen at the talent show. He had hyped it up perfectly, creating buzz without revealing too much. By Thursday, everyone at Riverside knew that Elijah Carter was performing, and everyone had an opinion about it. Most thought it would be a disaster. Some felt bad for him, imagining the humiliation that awaited. A very few, wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was more to Elijah than they had assumed. But the prevailing sentiment was one of morbid curiosity. People were excited the way they get excited about a car crash. They knew something bad was probably going to happen, but they couldn't look away. Elijah could feel it in the air, could hear it in the changed tone of the whispers that followed him. Part of him wanted to back out, to tell Brett he had changed his mind, to retreat back into the safety of invisibility. But he had made a promise. And more than that, he had something to prove. Not to Brett, not to the school, but to himself. He needed to know if he could do this, if his music was strong enough, if he was strong enough. On Thursday night, the night before the talent show, Elijah played his piece one final time. Grace sat on the couch, listening, tears streaming down her face. When the last note faded, she walked over and kissed her son's forehead. "You're ready," she said. "Tomorrow, you're going to show them who you really are." Elijah nodded, but inside he wasn't sure. He wasn't sure of anything except that in less than 24 hours his life was going to change forever. He just had no idea how much. What Elijah didn't know, what his mother didn't know, was that Brett had been conducting a campaign of psychological warfare designed to maximize the humiliation of the moment. Over the past week, Brett had carefully crafted a narrative on social media that painted Elijah's performance as the event of the year. On Instagram, Brett posted, "You guys are not ready for tomorrow's talent show. Trust me, this is going to be legendary." The post got hundreds of likes. Comments flooded in. "Is this about that blind kid? OMG, this is going to be so awkward. I feel bad, but I can't wait to see this. Brett, you're terrible." Brett responded to select comments, always maintaining plausible deniability. Just trying to give everyone a chance to shine, you know, supporting all students. On Snapchat, Brett's story showed him and his crew talking about how they had front row seats reserved, how they were bringing extra phone chargers to make sure they captured everything. Tyler, who was having more and more doubts about the whole plan, stayed quiet during these sessions. But Marcus and Jake were fully invested, feeding off Brett's energy, competing to make the most cutting jokes. By Friday morning, the day of the talent show, the anticipation had reached a fever pitch. Students who normally wouldn't have cared about the talent show were suddenly desperate to attend. The event was scheduled for 7 p.m. in the auditorium, and by lunchtime there was already a line of people trying to get good seats. Mrs. Patterson, Elijah's aide, had heard some of the chatter and was concerned. She pulled Elijah aside during lunch, speaking to him in the hallway outside the cafeteria. "Elijah, I want to talk to you about tonight," she said gently. "Okay," Elijah responded, his stomach already in knots. I want to make sure you're doing this for the right reasons, that you want to do this. Because if you're feeling pressured, or if anyone is making you feel like you have to, I want to do it," Elijah interrupted. and it was true. Despite his fears, despite his suspicions, he did want this. He wanted to play his father's music. He wanted people to hear what he could do. He wanted to be more than the blind kid with the cane. Mrs. Patterson sighed. Okay. Just know that I'll be there. Okay, and I'm proud of you for being brave enough to put yourself out there. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Elijah couldn't focus in any of his classes. His teachers, aware of what was coming, were patient with him, not pushing too hard. At 3 p.m., when the final bell rang, Elijah went home to rest and prepare. Grace had taken the evening off from both her jobs, a rare luxury, so she could be there to support her son. Meanwhile, at Riverside High School, the stage crew was setting up for the show. The auditorium seated 800 people, and every seat would be filled. The grand piano, normally kept locked in the music room, had been wheeled onto center stage. It was a beautiful instrument, a Steinway, that the school had purchased 15 years ago with grant money back when they had funding for arts programs. It sat there under the stage lights, waiting. By 6:30 p.m., students were pouring into the auditorium. Brett and his crew had staked out the front row, right where they had the best view. Brett's phone was fully charged, his camera app open and ready. He was grinning ear to ear, exchanging excited whispers with Marcus and Jake. Tyler sat silently next to them, his hands clasped in his lap, a knot of dread growing in his stomach. At 6:45, Grace and Elijah arrived at the school. They entered through a side door, avoiding the crowds, and made their way backstage. Elijah could hear the roar of the audience through the walls, could feel the vibration of hundreds of voices talking and laughing. His hands were shaking. Grace held his arm, steadying him. "You've got this, baby," she whispered. "Just remember, you're not playing for them. You're playing for yourself, for your dad. Let the music speak for itself." Elijah nodded, trying to calm his racing heart. Around them, other performers were warming up, practicing their lines, adjusting their costumes. A girl from the drama club was reciting a monologue to herself. The school band was tuning their instruments. Everyone was nervous, but nobody was nervous like Elijah. At 7:00 p.m., the lights dimmed in the auditorium. Principal Henderson walked onto the stage to scattered applause. She welcomed everyone to the annual Riverside High School Talent Show, talked about the importance of supporting student creativity, thanked the teachers who had organized the event. Her voice was professional, warm, completely unaware of the cruelty that was about to unfold on her stage. The show began. The first act was a dance routine by 3 cheerleaders. They were good polished, the kind of performance that always did well at these events. The audience applauded enthusiastically. Next came a comedy sketch by 2 boys from the improv club. It was funny enough to get some laughs. Then a girl with a beautiful voice sang a pop ballad that earned her a standing ovation from her friends. Backstage, Elijah listened to each performance, his anxiety building. He was scheduled to go on 5th right after a magic act that was currently on stage. The magician was having technical difficulties, fumbling with his props, getting pity applause. Elijah could hear whispers from the crew around him, could feel their eyes on him, could sense their anticipation. "You're up next," the stage manager said, touching Elijah's shoulder. This was it. No more time to prepare. No more time to back out. In less than 5 minutes, Elijah Carter would walk onto that stage and face every fear he had ever had. And Brett Williams would be there in the front row, camera ready, waiting for the disaster he was certain was coming. But Brett had made one critical mistake. He had underestimated Elijah Carter. He had seen only the disability, only the vulnerability, only the surface. He had no idea what was about to happen. None of them did. Let's rewind for a moment back to that morning, the day of the performance. Because there's a part of this story that needs to be told, a piece that helps explain what was about to happen on that stage. Elijah had woken up at 5:30 a.m., unable to sleep any longer. His mind was racing, his body tense with anticipation and fear. He got up quietly, not wanting to wake his mother, and made his way to the living room. His fingers found the piano keys in the darkness, and he began to play. Not his father's composition, not yet. Just scales and exercises warming up his fingers, calming his mind with the familiar patterns. As the sun rose and light began to filter through their apartment windows, light that Elijah couldn't see but could somehow feel, he transitioned into the piece he would perform that night. He played it slowly, carefully, making sure every note was perfect. This was more than just a performance. This was his chance to honor his father, to prove his worth, to maybe finally find his place in the world. Grace woke to the sound of piano music and lay in her bed for a long moment, listening. She thought about Jonathan, about the life they had planned together, about all the moments he had missed. She thought about Elijah, about how much strength it took for him to survive every day in a world that wasn't built for him, that often didn't want him. And she prayed to God or the universe or whatever force might be listening that tonight would be kind to her son. At breakfast, they sat together in comfortable silence. Grace had made Elijah's favorite pancakes with maple syrup, scrambled eggs, bacon. Comfort food. She knew he probably wouldn't be able to eat much. His stomach twisted with nerves, but she wanted him to start the day feeling loved and cared for. "Are you scared?" Grace asked, finally, breaking the silence. Elijah considered the question. "Yes," he admitted. "But also, I don't know, excited." "Is that weird?" "It's not weird at all. It means you care about this. It means it matters. What if I mess up? What if I forget a part, or my hands shake too much, or Grace reached across the table and took his hand? Then you mess up. And you know what? It won't be the end of the world. Music isn't about perfection, Elijah. Your father taught me that. It's about feeling, about connection, about sharing something true. Even if you play every note wrong, if you play with heart, it will still be beautiful." Elijah squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her certainty. "Will Dad be able to hear it, do you think?" Wherever he is, Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I think he's been listening to you every night for years, sweetheart. And I think tonight he'll be in that auditorium with you, guiding your fingers, sharing that stage. You're not alone in this." At school that day, the atmosphere was electric. Everyone knew about the talent show, and more specifically, everyone knew about Elijah's performance. The hallways buzzed with speculation and gossip. Some students felt genuinely excited for him, hoping he would succeed. Others were less kind in their expectations. In third period, Elijah's English class, the teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, made an announcement. "I want everyone to know that tonight one of our own is going to be performing in the talent show. Elijah Carter is showing real courage by putting himself out there, and I expect everyone from this class who attends to be respectful and supportive." There was a smattering of applause. Elijah felt his face flush. He appreciated Mr. Rodriguez's support. But the announcement also made him feel more exposed, more vulnerable. The weight of expectation was growing heavier by the hour. At lunch, Tyler from Brett's crew did something unexpected. He broke away from Brett and the others and walked over to Elijah's table. Elijah heard footsteps approaching, tensed, expecting another prank or cruel comment. "Hey, Elijah," Tyler said quietly. "Hi, Elijah," responded warily. Tyler hesitated, struggling with something. "I just wanted to say, I hope it goes well tonight. Your performance. I think it's cool that you're doing it." Elijah didn't know what to say. This was one of Brett's friends, one of the people who had laughed at him, who had participated in the bullying. Why was he being nice now? "Thanks," Elijah said finally. Tyler stood there for another moment as if wanting to say more, then walked away. He went back to Brett's table, where Brett immediately demanded to know what that was about. Tyler shrugged, said he was just psyching Elijah up, making sure he didn't back out. Brett seemed satisfied with this explanation, but Tyler couldn't shake the growing feeling that they were making a terrible mistake. The final hours before the talent show crawled by. Elijah went through his afternoon classes in a daze, unable to focus on anything except what was coming. Teachers spoke, and he didn't hear them. Students passed him in the hallway, and he barely registered their presence. His entire world had narrowed to a single point, 7 p.m. The stage, the piano, the moment of truth. When the final bell rang at 3:15 p.m., Elijah went home with his mother. They ate an early dinner, though Elijah could barely swallow. His stomach was a knot of anxiety so tight, it felt like it might never unravel. Grace tried to keep the conversation light, talking about normal things, trying to distract him, but it wasn't working. They both knew that in a few hours, everything would change. At 6:00 p.m., they began getting ready. Elijah put on the outfit they had carefully selected: dark slacks, a white button-down shirt, a navy blue tie. Grace helped him with the tie, her fingers trembling slightly. She stepped back to look at him and had to turn away for a moment, overcome with emotion. He looked so much like Jonathan had looked on the night they got married, young and nervous and beautiful. "You look very handsome," she managed to say. "Very professional." "I feel like I'm going to throw up," Elijah admitted. "That's normal. That means you care. Your father used to throw up before every big performance. Really. And then he'd walk out on that stage and play like an angel. You're more like him than you know, Elijah." They arrived at the school at 6:45 p.m., as planned. The parking lot was already packed, cars fighting for spaces, parents dropping off excited students. Grace had to park 3 blocks away, and they walked to the school together, Grace guiding Elijah, their steps synchronized after years of practice. Backstage was chaos. The stage manager, a harried-looking senior named Maya, was trying to coordinate 15 different acts, manage equipment, and keep everyone calm. When Elijah and Grace arrived, Maya looked down at her clipboard, found Elijah's name, and directed them to a quiet corner where they could wait. Around them, Riverside High School's talent show was coming to life. The dance crew was doing last-minute stretches. The band was arguing about the set list. The girl who was going to sing kept running to the bathroom, nervous about her voice. Everyone had their own rituals, their own ways of coping with the pressure. Elijah sat in a folding chair, his hands clasped in his lap, and listened. He could hear the audience starting to arrive, the auditorium filling with voices and footsteps and anticipation. He could feel the vibration of hundreds of people moving above and around him, and he could feel his heart beating so hard he thought it might burst through his chest. Grace sat beside him, holding his hand. "Do you want to practice? Want to go over anything?" Elijah shook his head. "I just want to stay here for a minute. Is that okay?" "Of course, sweetheart. Whatever you need." At 7:00 p.m., they heard Principal Henderson's voice through the walls, welcoming everyone to the show. The audience applauded. The show began. And with each act that performed, Elijah's moment drew closer. The dancers went first. From backstage, Elijah could hear the music, the pounding bass, the cheers of the crowd. Then the comedy sketch with its waves of laughter. Then the singer whose voice soared through the auditorium, earning a standing ovation that Elijah could feel through the floor. "You're up soon," Maya whispered to him as the magician took the stage. "Maybe 2 minutes. Are you ready?" Elijah stood up, his legs shaky. Grace stood with him, her hands on his shoulders. "Remember, she said, you're not playing for them. You're playing for yourself and for your father. Let everything else fall away. Let there be only you and the music." Elijah nodded. He could do this. He had to do this. The magician finished his act to polite applause. Maya touched Elijah's arm. "You're up. The piano is center stage. I'll guide you to it, and then it's all yours." This was it. The moment Elijah had been preparing for, dreading, longing for. He took a deep breath, picked up his white cane, and followed Maya toward the stage entrance. Behind him, Grace watched her son walk toward his destiny, her heart full of pride and fear and love, so overwhelming she could barely breathe. In the front row, Brett Williams leaned forward in his seat, phone in hand, camera app, open, a smile on his face. Next to him, Tyler felt sick. This was wrong. He knew it was wrong, but he didn't know how to stop it, and he was too much of a coward to try. Principal Henderson was back at the microphone. She looked down at her notes, then out at the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, our next performer is making his talent show debut tonight. Please welcome Elijah Carter." The applause was scattered, uncertain. Some people clapped, genuinely wanting to be supportive. Others clapped mockingly, anticipating entertainment of the wrong kind. And some didn't clap at all, just watched with curious, cruel eyes as the blind boy with the white cane made his way onto the stage. The stage lights were bright, searingly, so though Elijah couldn't see them. What he could feel was the heat they generated, the way they seemed to press down on him from above. He could feel the vastness of the space around him, so different from the small rooms and narrow hallways he was used to navigating. And he could feel, with a sense more primal than any of his functioning 5, the attention of 800 people focused entirely on him. His white cane tapped against the stage floor, tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed in the suddenly silent auditorium, amplified by the space, by the stillness, by the collective held breath of the audience. To his left, he could sense the edge of the stage, the drop-off to the orchestra pit below. To his right, somewhere in the darkness beyond the lights, sat his mother, his teachers, his classmates, his tormentors. Maya had guided him to stage left, and then released him, stepping back into the wings. She had whispered, "The piano is straight ahead about 20 feet, center stage. You've got this." And then she was gone, and Elijah was alone. 20 feet. It might as well have been 20 miles. Elijah took a step forward, his cane sweeping the floor in front of him, checking for obstacles, for edges, for anything that might trip him up. Another step. Another tap. The silence in the auditorium was suffocating. Someone coughed. Someone else laughed, a sharp, nervous sound that was quickly stifled. In the front row, Brett was recording. His phone camera captured everything: Elijah's slow, careful progress across the stage, the awkward angle of his cane, the slight tremor in his hands. Brett's grin was wide. This was already gold. The kid looked terrified, looked pathetic, and he hadn't even sat down at the piano yet. Brett zoomed in on Elijah's face, on the expression of concentration mixed with fear, thinking about how many views this video would get, how viral it would go. Tyler, sitting next to Brett, couldn't watch. He stared down at his hands, his jaw clenched, shame burning in his chest. What were they doing? Why had he gone along with this? This wasn't funny. This was cruelty, pure and simple. But he didn't say anything. Didn't stop Brett. just sat there complicit in his silence. Elijah had made it halfway across the stage when something happened that would become one of the most talked about moments of the evening, though it was completely unplanned. His cane caught on a cable that the stage crew had taped down, but not quite well enough. The cane snagged, and Elijah stumbled, his balance suddenly gone. For a heart-stopping moment he teetered, his arms windmilling, and it looked like he was going to fall. The audience gasped. Some people started to laugh, but caught themselves. In the front row, Brett's grin got even wider. This was perfect. Even better than he'd hoped. But Elijah didn't fall. His other hand shot out, found the edge of a speaker that was positioned stage right, and he caught himself. He stood there for a moment, his breath coming hard, his face flushed with embarrassment. And then he did something that no one expected. He took a deep breath, straightened his posture, and continued walking toward the piano, with his head held high. It was such a small thing, such a simple act of dignity and determination. But something in that moment shifted for some of the people watching. They saw, perhaps for the first time, not a victim, or a joke, or a disability, but a person. A young man with courage, with pride, with a refusal to be broken by their mockery. Mrs. Patterson, sitting in the back with other faculty, felt tears prick her eyes. Mr. Rodriguez, the English teacher, sat forward in his seat, suddenly invested in a way he hadn't been moments before. And Grace, sitting in the middle section, clutched the armrests of her seat and prayed with every fiber of her being that her son would make it to that piano, would sit down, would play. Elijah found the piano with his hand, the smooth, cool surface of the Steinway's case. He traced his fingers along it, finding the bench, orienting himself. He carefully collapsed his cane and set it down beside the bench, where he could easily find it later. Then he sat down, his posture straight professional, the way his mother had taught him. The piano bench was at the wrong height. Someone had adjusted it for a previous performer and hadn't set it back. Elijah could feel that his position wasn't quite right, that his arms would have to reach too far. He fumbled for a moment with the adjustment mechanism, trying to figure it out without being able to see it. More giggles from the audience, more zooming in from Brett's camera. Finally, Elijah got the bench adjusted. He positioned himself in front of the keys, his hands resting on his knees, his head bowed. And he took a moment, just a moment, to center himself, to find his calm, to remember why he was here. In that silence, in that pause, something remarkable happened. The jeering stopped. The whispers died away. 800 people who had come expecting a disaster found themselves actually waiting to hear what would happen next. They were engaged, despite themselves, curious in spite of their cruelty. The boy at the piano had somehow, against all odds, earned their attention. Elijah lifted his hands and placed them gently on the keys. His fingers found their positions middle C with his right thumb, the chord structure mapped out in his muscle memory, in the countless hours of practice, in the genetic inheritance from a father he barely remembered but felt connected to every time he played. He took one more breath, thought of his mother sitting out there in the darkness, thought of his father somewhere in the ether watching, thought of every person who had ever underestimated him, ever pitied him, ever seen him as less than whole. And then Elijah Carter began to play. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant. A simple melody in the right hand, gentle and sweet, like a question being asked quietly. The left hand came in underneath, providing support, harmony, context. The piece had begun in C major, a key that feels like home, like safety, like the comfort of familiar spaces. For the first few measures, the audience wasn't sure what they were hearing. It sounded good, but maybe it was simple enough that anyone could play it. Some people were still skeptical, still waiting for the disaster they'd been promised. Brett had his phone up, still recording, but his grin was starting to falter. This wasn't what he'd expected. But then, about 30 seconds in the piece, began to evolve. The right-hand melody started to diverge from the expected pattern, taking unexpected turns, adding flourishes that required real technical skill. The left hand grew more complex, introducing a jazz-influenced bass line that gave the music depth and sophistication. Elijah's fingers moved with increasing confidence, finding their rhythm falling into the flow of the music. This was his father's composition, but it was also his own. Jonathan Carter had written the bones of this piece, the core melody and harmonic structure, but he had died before completing it. Elijah had found the unfinished sheet music in a box of his father's things when he was 11, and his mother had described it to him, had helped him understand what his father had been trying to create. And over the years Elijah had completed, it had added his own voice to his father's, had turned it into something that belonged to both of them. The piece was telling a story. It was telling Elijah's story and Jonathan's story, and the story of anyone who had ever felt lost in darkness, but found their way through it. The music spoke of pain and loss, but also of hope and resilience. Each phrase built on the last, the emotional intensity growing gradually naturally, like dawn breaking over a dark landscape. In the audience, people were starting to pay attention in a different way. The mockery was fading, replaced by something else, genuine interest. This wasn't a disaster. This wasn't comedy. This was real music played by someone who actually knew what they were doing. Tyler felt his throat tighten. The kid could play. The blind kid they had been planning to humiliate, the one they had set up as a joke, could actually genuinely play. And not just play, but play beautifully. Tyler glanced over at Brett and saw that his friend's face had changed. The grin was gone, replaced by an expression of confusion and something that might have been embarrassment. Grace sat with her hands clasped to her chest, tears already streaming down her face. She knew this piece intimately. She had listened to Jonathan play the unfinished version 1,000 times, and now her son was playing it, completing it, honoring his father's memory in the most beautiful way possible. She wanted to stand up and shout, wanted everyone to know that this was her boy, her remarkable, talented, brave boy. On stage, Elijah was no longer thinking about the audience. The fear had fallen away, burned off by the heat of the music. There was only the piano, only the keys beneath his fingers, only the sound filling the auditorium. This was what he had been born to do. This was his voice, his truth, his way of showing the world who he really was. The first section of the piece was coming to an end, transitioning into the second movement. And this was where it would get really interesting. Because the second movement was where Elijah had added the most of his own compositional work, where he had taken his father's foundation and built something entirely new on top of it. It was more complex, more challenging, more emotionally intense, and it was about to blow everyone's mind. The transition into the second movement was marked by a shift in key from C major to E minor. The music suddenly took on a darker tone, more melancholy, more introspective. The tempo slowed slightly, and Elijah's playing became more deliberate, more weighted with emotion. If the first section had been about hope and innocence, this section was about struggle and pain. His left hand began a repeating bass pattern, deep and resonant, like a heartbeat or the ticking of a clock. Over this, his right hand wove a melody that was almost painfully beautiful, full of unexpected intervals and dissonances that resolved into moments of clarity. The piece was asking questions, now hard questions about suffering and meaning, and why the world was the way it was. Elijah's fingers were flying over the keys with a precision and speed that seemed impossible. How could someone who couldn't see the keyboard know exactly where every note was? How could he move so fluidly between registers, his hands crossing over each other, leaping octaves, finding complex chord voicings without a single mistake? It was like watching magic, like witnessing something that shouldn't be possible. In the auditorium, the last traces of mockery had evaporated completely. 800 people sat in absolute silence, transfixed. Some had their mouths open in awe. Others had tears running down their faces without even realizing it. The music was doing something to them, reaching into places they usually kept locked away, making them feel things they had been trying to avoid. Brett had lowered his phone. He wasn't recording anymore. He was just staring at the stage at Elijah with an expression of complete shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. The blind kid wasn't supposed to be talented. He was supposed to be a joke, a punchline, a moment of entertainment at someone else's expense. But instead, Brett was witnessing something transcendent, something that was making him feel small and cruel and deeply, profoundly wrong. Mrs. Patterson was openly crying now, not bothering to hide it. She had worked with Elijah for 3 years, had walked with him through hallways, had helped him navigate a school that was never designed with him in mind. And she had known he was a good kid, a smart kid, a kind kid. But she had never known this, had never known he possessed this kind of gift. The piece continued to build. The second movement had reached its emotional peak, a cascade of notes that tumbled over each other like water rushing over rocks, powerful and inevitable. And then, just when it seemed like it couldn't get any more intense, the music pulled back. The tempo slowed. The volume dropped. And Elijah began to play the third and final movement. This section was something else entirely. It was redemptive, triumphant, but not in an obvious way. It wasn't loud or bombastic. Instead, it was quiet confidence, inner strength, the kind of triumph that comes from surviving something difficult and coming out the other side changed, but intact. The melody from the first movement returned, but transformed, more mature, more complex. It was the same question being asked again, but this time with the wisdom of experience behind it. Elijah's face, as he played, was completely peaceful. His eyes were closed, though that made no difference to him. His body swayed slightly with the music moving, with the phrases breathing with the dynamics. He was completely present, completely absorbed, completely himself in a way he had never been able to be in the hallways of Riverside High School or anywhere else in his public life. This was the real Elijah Carter, not the disabled kid, not the victim, not the object of pity or mockery. Just Elijah, a brilliant young musician with something important to say and the skill to say it beautifully. The final section of the piece was approaching. Elijah had structured it as a kind of conversation between his father's original material and his own additions, the two voices interweaving, supporting each other, creating something greater than either could have been alone. The harmonies grew richer, more sophisticated. Both hands were now working together in perfect synchronization, creating a tapestry of sound that filled every corner of the auditorium. In row 12, a freshman girl named Sophie was crying so hard her shoulders were shaking. The music had reached something in her, had touched some pain or hope or memory that she kept buried. She wasn't alone. All around the auditorium, people were having private emotional experiences triggered by Elijah's music brought to the surface by his raw honesty and skill. Grace had her hand over her mouth, trying to muffle her sobs. She could hear Jonathan in this music, could feel him present, sharing this moment with their son. The piece that he had started 15 years ago was finally being completed, was finally being shared with the world. And it was perfect. More perfect than she had ever imagined it could be. The music was building toward its final climax now. Elijah's hands were moving with incredible speed, the notes coming so fast they almost blurred together into pure sound. The bass was thundering the treble, singing the middle voices, connecting everything together. It was overwhelming, glorious, a flood of emotion and technique and passion. And then, just before the very end, Elijah did something unexpected. He introduced a brief pause, a moment of silence right before the final chord. In that silence, the entire auditorium held its breath. Not a single person moved. Not a single whisper broke the quiet. 800 people waited suspended in anticipation for what would come next. Elijah's hands came down on the final chord, a complex, rich voicing that combined elements from all three movements, that synthesized everything that had come before into one perfect moment of sound. He held it, letting it ring out, letting it fill the space, using the sustain pedal to let the notes overlap and harmonize with each other. And then slowly, gradually, he released the keys and the pedal, letting the sound decay, naturally fading away, like the end of a prayer or a spell or a dream. The final note disappeared into silence. Elijah sat still, his hands resting on his knees, his head bowed. The piece was over. He had done it. He had played his father's music, their music, and he had played it perfectly. Every note had been right. Every phrase had been exactly as he had envisioned it. He had given everything he had, and it had been enough. For 3 full seconds after the music ended, the auditorium remained in perfect silence. It wasn't the hostile silence from when Elijah had first walked on stage. This was different. This was the silence of 800 people trying to process what they had just experienced, trying to find words or thoughts or any kind of response adequate to what they had just witnessed. Elijah sat at the piano, uncertain. He couldn't see the audience, couldn't read their faces, couldn't tell if what he had done was good enough or if he had somehow failed. The silence stretched on, and with each passing second, his heart sank a little further. They had hated it. They were sitting there in shocked silence, not because he'd been good, but because he'd been so bad they didn't know how to respond. This had all been a huge mistake. He never should have. And then it started. One person began to clap, then another, then another. And then, like a dam breaking the entire auditorium, erupted into applause so loud, so overwhelming, so thunderous that Elijah actually flinched at the sound. 800 people were on their feet, standing, cheering, clapping so hard their hands hurt. The sound was deafening, a wave of appreciation and awe and respect crashing over the stage. Elijah lifted his head, his face showing confusion, disbelief, hope. They were clapping. They were actually clapping. Not ironically, not mockingly, but genuinely enthusiastically, with real appreciation for what he had just done. Grace was standing in her section, clapping and crying and laughing all at once. She wanted to run up on that stage and hold her son and tell him how proud she was, how amazing he had been, how his father would have been in tears watching him. But she stayed in her seat, clapping until her palms stung, letting the moment belong to Elijah. Mrs. Patterson was standing, clapping, wiping tears from her eyes with one hand. Mr. Rodriguez was on his feet, whistling, shouting bravo like he was at Carnegie Hall instead of a high school auditorium. Principal Henderson, standing in the back, was smiling with genuine surprise and pride, realizing that she had just witnessed something special, something that would be talked about for years at Riverside. All around the auditorium, people who had come to laugh were instead cheering. Students who had never spoken to Elijah, who had walked past him in the hallways without acknowledgement, were applauding with tears on their faces. Teachers who had taught him but never really seen him were standing in ovation, reconsidering everything they thought they knew about potential and ability and worth. The standing ovation continued for over a minute, an eternity in performance time. People were shouting words of encouragement, praising him, calling his name. Some were recording on their phones, but now not to mock, to preserve, to remember this moment when the blind kid nobody believed in had shown everyone what he was truly capable of. On stage, Elijah slowly stood up. He was shaking, overwhelmed by the response, barely able to process that this was real. He turned toward where he thought the audience was, and gave a small, humble bow. This triggered another wave of applause, even louder than before. Someone in the back started chanting, "Elijah, Elijah," and others picked it up until a significant portion of the auditorium was chanting his name. Elijah reached down for his cane, his hands trembling so badly he almost dropped it. He unfolded it, oriented himself, and began the walk back across the stage to the wings. But this time the walk was completely different. This time he walked with his head high, his steps confident, his entire bearing changed. He was no longer the invisible boy, the target, the victim. He was Elijah Carter, pianist, and he had just given the performance of his life. As he reached the wings, Maya, the stage manager, was there, her face streaked with tears, and she pulled him into a spontaneous hug, whispering, "That was incredible. Oh my God, that was incredible." Other performers waiting backstage crowded around, congratulating him, some of them crying themselves, all of them having witnessed something that had changed their understanding of what was possible. The applause was still going. Principal Henderson had to walk back on stage and gesture for people to sit down to let the show continue, but even then, it took another 30 seconds for the audience to settle. And when they did, the energy in the auditorium had completely transformed. What had been anticipation for a disaster had become celebration of a triumph. The entire atmosphere of the evening had shifted. But the most profound transformation wasn't happening in the auditorium at large. It was happening in the front row, in the heart and mind of Brett Williams, who was sitting down slowly, his face pale, his hands shaking, tears streaming down his cheeks. Because Brett had just realized something that would haunt him for a long time. He had tried to destroy someone who possessed more talent, more courage, and more grace than he would ever have. And in trying to break Elijah Carter, he had instead revealed his own brokenness. Backstage had descended into controlled chaos. The other acts were still performing. The show had to go on, but everyone's attention was fractured now. People kept whispering about what had just happened, about Elijah's performance, about how unexpected and incredible it had been. The dancers who performed after Elijah would later say they felt like an afterthought, performing for an audience that was still processing what they'd just witnessed. Elijah had found a quiet corner, his mother beside him, and he was crying. Not sad tears, but the tears that come from releasing years of pent-up emotion, from surviving something difficult, from finally being seen. Grace held him, rocking him slightly, whispering to him that he had been perfect, that his father would have been so proud that she loved him more than words could express. "Did I really do okay?" Elijah asked, his voice small and uncertain, despite the thunderous response he'd received. "They really liked it." Liked it? Grace laughed through her tears. Sweetheart, you were extraordinary. You were brilliant. You showed them who you really are. Mrs. Patterson found them and added her congratulations. Mr. Rodriguez came by to shake Elijah's hand and tell him that he was going to be talking about this performance for the rest of his teaching career. Even the magician whose act had preceded Elijah's, who had been feeling bad about his own technical difficulties, came over to say that Elijah's performance had made the whole show worthwhile. But the person Elijah was waiting to hear from, though he would never admit it, never arrived. Brett Williams stayed in the auditorium, stayed in his seat, unable to move, unable to process what he was feeling. His friends had scattered Jake and Marcus, uncomfortable and guilty Tyler, fighting the urge to go backstage and apologize, but not sure he had the right. The elaborate joke, the viral video, the humiliation they had planned, all of it, had backfired spectacularly. Instead of destroying Elijah, they had given him a platform. And in doing so, they had exposed themselves. The talent show ended around 8:45 p.m. Students filtered out of the auditorium, their conversations dominated by one topic, Elijah's performance. Social media was already exploding with posts and videos, but unlike what Brett had planned, these posts were celebratory, not mocking. Elijah. Carter was starting to trend locally. People who had recorded the performance were sharing it with captions like, "You have to hear this and most incredible thing I've ever seen at our school." Brett had stayed in his seat until almost everyone had left. He sat in the darkening auditorium, staring at the stage, trying to understand what he was feeling. Shame, certainly. Guilt, absolutely. But also something else, something more profound, a complete dismantling of his worldview. He had built his identity on being better than others, on being the alpha, the leader, the one who could dominate and control. And a blind kid with a piano had just shown him how hollow that identity was. Finally, Brett stood and walked backstage. He didn't know why he was going or what he would say. He just knew he needed to face what he had done. He found Elijah and Grace in a small room where the performers had been storing their things. They were getting ready to leave, packing up Grace, describing to Elijah how beautiful the auditorium had looked during his performance. Brett knocked on the open door. Both Grace and Elijah turned toward the sound. Grace recognized Brett immediately from parent-teacher conferences, from complaints she had made to the school about bullying. Her face hardened, protective instincts kicking in. But Elijah's expression was different, cautious, but not hostile. Tired, but curious. "Elijah Brett," said his voice hoarse. "Can I talk to you?" Grace looked like she wanted to refuse to protect her son from this boy who had caused him so much pain. But Elijah touched her arm gently. "It's okay, Mom," he said quietly. Then to Brett, "What do you want?" Brett stepped into the room and Grace could see that he had been crying, that he was genuinely shaken. I need to tell you something. I need to apologize." For what Elijah asked, though they both knew the answer. Brett's voice cracked as he spoke. "For everything. For bullying you. For being cruel. For this." He gestured vaguely at the stage beyond. "This whole thing getting you to perform it was supposed to be a joke. Me and my friends, we thought it would be funny to watch you fail in front of everyone. We set you up." The words hung in the air. Grace's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening in horror and anger. She had suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed was like a punch to the gut. Elijah's expression didn't change much, which somehow made it worse. He had known. On some level, he had always known it was a trap. But he had done it anyway. "I know," Elijah said simply. Brett looked stunned. "You knew not for sure, but I suspected. You've never been nice to me before. It didn't make sense that you suddenly would be. Then why did you do it?" Elijah was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Then he said, "Because I wanted to. Not because you invited me. Not because I thought you were being genuine, but because I wanted people to hear what I could do. I wanted to prove to myself that I was brave enough to try." The simplicity and honesty of this answer broke something in Brett. He sank down onto a folding chair, his head in his hands. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You could have been amazing anywhere but I tried to ruin it for you. I tried to take something beautiful and make it ugly. And instead you were incredible. You were better than anything I could ever do, and you showed everyone, including me, what a piece of shit I am." Grace wanted to throw Brett out, wanted to tell him his apology was too little too late, that he didn't deserve forgiveness. But Elijah spoke before she could. "Thank you for apologizing," Elijah said. "It doesn't make what you did okay, but it's a start." Brett looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "What can I do? How can I make this right?" "Be better," Elijah said. "Don't treat people the way you treated me. See people for who they really are, not what you think they are. That's how you make it right." It was a more gracious response than Brett deserved, and everyone in the room knew it. Brett nodded, wiping his eyes, and stood up. "I'll try. I promise I'll try." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, that was the most incredible thing I've ever heard. You're really talented, Elijah. Like genuinely talented." "Thank you," Elijah said quietly. Brett left, then walking out into the hallway and then out of the school into the parking lot where his truck was one of the few vehicles left. He sat in the driver's seat for a long time, not starting the engine, just thinking about the person he had been and the person he wanted to become. It would be a long journey, one that would take years, not hours, but it had started tonight in the most unexpected way possible. In the days and weeks following the talent show, Riverside High School changed. Not overnight, not dramatically, but gradually, like ice melting in spring. The video of Elijah's performance, recorded by dozens of phones, went viral beyond just their local area. It was shared on Reddit, on Twitter, on TikTok. Millions of people watched the blind teenager play piano, and millions of people were moved by it. News outlets picked up the story. Local TV stations interviewed Elijah and Grace. A classical music magazine wrote an article about him. A music school in the city offered him a scholarship for lessons with their best piano instructors. Suddenly, Elijah Carter wasn't just a student at Riverside High School. He was something more. But more important than the external attention was what changed inside the school itself. Students who had never talked to Elijah before started greeting him in the hallways. Not everyone, and not all the time, but enough that he no longer felt completely invisible. Teachers made more of an effort to include him, to see his contributions beyond just his disability. The music teacher, Ms. Hernandez, asked if he would consider helping with the music program, maybe tutoring younger students or playing at school events. Brett Williams kept his promise. He didn't transform overnight into a perfect person, but he stopped bullying. He quit making cruel jokes. He started calling people out when his friends acted like he used to act. Tyler, Marcus, and Jake followed his lead, all of them trying in their own ways to be better. The transformation wasn't complete, wasn't perfect, but it was real. Elijah started eating lunch with a group of students from the music program who had reached out to him after the performance. He found himself for the first time in his life at Riverside feeling like he belonged somewhere. He still faced challenges. The school still wasn't perfectly accessible. People still sometimes treated him with pity instead of respect. But things were better. Undeniably, measurably better. Grace watched her son blossom over those weeks with a joy she hadn't felt since Jonathan was alive. She saw him smile more, heard him talk about his day with enthusiasm instead of dread. She knew that one performance hadn't solved everything, hadn't erased years of isolation and pain. But it had been a turning point, a before and after moment in Elijah's life. The piano at home continued to be Elijah's sanctuary, but it meant something different now. It wasn't just an escape anymore. It was also a connection, a bridge between him and the world, a way to communicate what words couldn't express. He continued to play every evening, working on new pieces, composing his own music, preparing for the lessons he would start at the music school in the summer. 3 months after the talent show Riverside High School held its spring concert. The music program, reinvigorated by the attention Elijah's performance had brought, had organized an ambitious program featuring the school band choir and several solo performers. Elijah had been asked to close the concert with a performance. The auditorium was packed again, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. People had come to see Elijah Carter, the pianist, the artist, the young man who had changed their school with his courage and talent. There were no cruel jokes, no mocking anticipation, just genuine excitement and respect. When Elijah walked onto the stage this time without fear, this time with his mother and Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Rodriguez, and dozens of other supporters watching, the audience erupted into applause before he even sat down at the piano. He smiled a genuine smile that transformed his face and took his bow. He played a new piece that night, one he had composed himself in the months since the talent show. It was called Emergence, and it told the story of moving from darkness into light, of finding your voice, of the courage it takes to be seen. It was technically brilliant and emotionally powerful, and when it ended, the standing ovation was even longer than it had been the first time. But the most meaningful moment came after the concert, when Brett Williams approached Elijah backstage. The two boys had maintained a careful distance over the past months, Brett respecting Elijah's space, Elijah not quite ready to forgive, but also not hostile. Tonight, though, Brett had something to say. "That was incredible," Brett said. "Thank you for playing." "Thanks for listening," Elijah replied. There was a pause, and then Brett said, "I've been accepted to college. I'm going to study to be a social worker. I want to help kids who are struggling, who are marginalized. I want to do something good with my life instead of just..." He trailed off. Elijah nodded slowly. "That's good. That's really good. I wanted you to know that you changed me. What you did standing on that stage, even though you knew it was a trap, playing that music even though you were scared, it showed me what real courage looks like. And I want to have that. I want to be better, then be better," Elijah said, echoing his words from 3 months earlier. "Every day, just try to be a little better than you were the day before." Brett extended his hand, and after a moment, Elijah shook it. It wasn't forgiveness, not complete forgiveness. That would take time, might never fully come. But it was acknowledgement. It was a recognition that people can change, that harm can be healed, that even in the darkest situations, there's always a possibility of light. As Elijah and Grace walked out of the school that night into the warm spring evening, Grace asked her son how he was feeling. "Good," Elijah said, and he meant it. "Really good, Mom." They walked to their car, Grace describing the beautiful sunset happening over Riverside High School, painting the sky in oranges and pinks and purples. Elijah couldn't see it, but he could imagine it, could feel the warmth of the fading day on his face. And he thought about his journey, about where he had been and where he was going. He thought about the boy he had been just months ago, alone, afraid, invisible. And he thought about the young man he was becoming, confident, talented, seen. He thought about his father, about the music that connected them across time and death. And he thought about the future, about all the performances still to come, all the music still to be written, all the possibilities still waiting to be discovered. Sometimes Elijah reflected the greatest performances happen not in concert halls, but in high school auditoriums. Sometimes the most important audience is not made up of critics and connoisseurs, but of classmates and bullies and people who think they have you all figured out. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stand up, sit down at a piano, and show the world who you really are. The auditorium had fallen silent that night 3 months ago when Elijah walked onto the stage. But what happened next didn't just leave 800 people speechless. It changed lives, started conversations, sparked transformations. One performance, one act of courage, one decision to be seen despite the risk. That's the thing about music, about art, about any genuine expression of human truth. It has the power to reach past our defenses, past our prejudices, past everything we think we know about each other and ourselves. It reminds us of our shared humanity. It shows us that the person we thought we understood, the person we dismissed or underestimated or never bothered to see, might be carrying within them something extraordinary. Elijah Carter was blind, but he helped hundreds of people see clearly for the first time. He couldn't see the faces of his audience, but he showed them reflections of themselves they needed to witness. He lived in darkness, but he brought light to everyone around him. And that, in the end, is what art does. That's what courage does. That's what happens when you refuse to let others define you, when you trust in your gifts, when you step onto that stage and play your truth, even when your hands are shaking, even when you're terrified, even when you know it might all go wrong. Elijah Carter played the piano at school as a joke, but the joke was on everyone who thought disability meant inability, who confused blindness with helplessness, who believed that someone different couldn't also be extraordinary. His performance left 800 people speechless. But more importantly, it gave one young man his voice, his place, his moment of triumph. And that moment echoed forward, changing not just one night, but countless days to come. The music ended, but its effects never will. That's the power of art. That's the power of courage. That's the power of one person deciding to be seen, deciding to be heard, deciding that they matter. And Elijah Carter, he mattered more than anyone had ever imagined.